Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are in the world. Thank you for joining me for this week's edition of the SMIE Consulting Midweek Roundup. It's Wednesday, October 22nd, 2025, and today we're going to be answering 3 questions we've been hearing from international educators over the last 7 days. And as we do each week on the Roundup, we take our questions that we ask on Wednesdays from our newsletter that comes out every Monday at 9 a.m. Eastern Time. For those of you who are already subscribed, thank you for being a part of the conversation. We send that out at 9 o'clock every Monday morning. Through email. For those of you who have subscribed through our website, I'll drop the link to our website in the chat for your reference at smieconsulting.org/subscribe. And that email version comes out, and for those not familiar with it, the email has, and the newsletter has 4 different sections. First up is a roundup of social media news, which is part of the company name, Social Media and International Education Consulting, LLC. The social media now is taken on much more of anything digital, online, webcasts, upcoming webinars, blogs, podcasts, digital reports, generative AI, all of the kind of topics that we are dealing with in international education. You'll find that available in the email version as well as a LinkedIn version. And you can subscribe to either one, whichever your choice is, at our website at smieconsulting.org/subscribe. The LinkedIn version and the email version come out within a half hour of each other. The LinkedIn version comes out typically a half hour earlier. If you prefer to get your digital news via LinkedIn, you certainly are welcome to get it that way as well. Happy to report that between the two versions of the newsletter, we now have over 2,750 subscribers. So really thank you to all of my international ed colleagues around the world who have made reading the SMIE newsletter something that you make a regular part of your weekly international edification. And this week we do take a look through our live chat here on the topics of the day that really matter, as in the newsletter, we kind of give you our hot takes on some of the top news stories that are perplexing our profession at any given week. We go a little bit next level here and look at those topics we covered in the newsletter and see what kind of general themes have developed in terms of popular news stories. There's usually 2 or 3 stories that may be coming at things from a different perspective, and we will share those links in the chat that are also from the newsletter. So if you already get the newsletter, you don't need to worry about the links that I'll be sharing here on the live chat. And the live chat is going out on Facebook page for SMIE Consulting, my personal Facebook page, the SMIE Consulting LinkedIn page, and my personal professional LinkedIn profile. So happy to be sharing with you today these 3 questions. First up, how is AI being used in the college admissions process? Second, are the new arrival numbers in the U.S. what we really think they are? And finally, how will Australia change its international education strategy? Those are the 3 questions we're going to be answering today over the next 20 plus minutes or so. Now, with the first question, how is AI being used in the college admissions process? I'm taking it today, and I do talk about AI regularly on the live chats, and certainly there's hardly a week that goes by that we don't see some sort of story in the newsletter about AI and how it's being leveraged on campus or in the admissions process. But today we're focusing on the admissions process specifically and how students might be using it, using AI. What we were initially made aware of back in almost 3 years ago, I think January of 2023 is when we first started seeing significant news coming on generative AI, when ChatGPT was launched, and then all the various other versions that other companies have put together to make basically prompt engineering, creating AI agents to search for very specific information, and then also create content, whether it be for social media posts, for summaries of articles, that kind of thing. So we see AI being used every day in what we do for work now. I have an AI agent that summarizes notes from every webinar I have, so I can go back over them without having to take mad notes myself, and make sure that any to-do items that get added to my list, I'm able to track efficiently through that AI agent. So there are applications, obviously mobile apps that help leverage AI. There's all sorts of different tools through the different web browsers companies, whether it's Copilot for Microsoft, for Gemini, for Google Chrome. All of them have their own AI elements to it, and there's multiple other free and subscription models for AI tools that you can use. But as it relates to the admissions process, when this first generative AI as a thing started breaking in January of 2023, we all realized quickly that for those institutions that rely on essays as part of their application review process, typically for undergraduate admissions at more selective institutions, and then perhaps using AI to write essays or statement of purposes for graduate applications for master's or doctoral programs. That was the original, oh my gosh, students are going to start writing these brilliantly crafted essays using AI tools, and then it'll be impossible for us to know whether it's actually their work or not. So that was the big concern back in the day. So almost 3 years ago now, that we were particularly worried about in the admissions office. Now that has evolved, and we see, yes, there are still students that will use maybe AI to not necessarily write their essays, but refine, maybe ask AI to be an editor for something they've already written, to make sure it's grammatically correct, that it's in their voice, and it has the kind of content that you might expect it to have. So that is something that is still happening today, but AI is being used differently in the admissions process. There are two articles that I've shared in the chat. One is from Inside Higher Ed that says admissions essays written by AI are generic and easy to spot, and some of the reasons why. And the other is an article from Insider's Guide. It's actually from Australia. But the article is new research shows how ChatGPT is choosing your next university. Now, this comes on the heels of a very interesting session I attended last week at the Education USA MENA Regional Forum in Riyadh, Saudi Arabia, where one of the newer Education USA advisors based in Tunisia was sharing her expertise and experience working with AI in helping students do their research on the institutions that they might be applying to, and help creating agents to whittle down the vast number of U.S. colleges and that there are into a more manageable number. And she walked through some of the ways that that students are able to do that, and she's working with students to help them identify, because obviously with 4,500 colleges and universities that are accredited in the U.S., for an international student that really doesn't have any point of reference other than a few handful of named schools that she might know, to get a true grasp on what the best school is for me, what the best fit is, and what that looks like, what are the criteria that a student should use to define fit. And having someone who can help walk them through that process, because students don't know what they don't know, right? And when they search basic criteria about size of school, about costs, about scholarships, about location, geographic location, climate location, suburban, urban, rural location, all of those kind of things matter. And those can be readily identified from various search engines that exist, college search engines where you can whittle down the numbers to a manageable chunk. But for international students who don't really have a perspective on what the college experience, unless they've had friends who are a year or two ahead of them that are in the U.S. now at a U.S. college or university, experiencing life as to what it might be like for them. Hopefully students have those kind of people in their lives they can refer to, because they tend to be ones that will have good experiences, then want to tell their friends back home, hey, it's a great place, come and join me. So this is the kind of thing that we really want to think about as we talk about our institutions and as we devise and update and regularly make sure our content on who we are as an institution is being reflected accurately in search results. So the two areas that we're talking about today are in the search process and in the application essay writing process. Those are the two areas most commonly we're finding prospective students using AI when they're applying to us. And specifically, the research element is important for international students as a way to help get through the bulk of a very comprehensive and complex process if you're going to truly analyze institutions that make sense. Back in the day, we had this worksheet that we created in 2011-12 for Education USA as part of Your 5 Steps to US Study, which is still used to this very day as a kind of a guiding set of steps and principles that students can use, whether they're applying for an ESL program, an undergraduate degree, a graduate degree, short-term exchanges, all of that. This guide in 5 Steps to US Study included a worksheet called Define Your Priorities. It's still being used. It's a worksheet that's kind of a self-assessment of what's important to a student in terms of what we think that they might need, and it covers things about activities they might want to get involved in, size of a school, all the things I mentioned earlier. But one of the things that you want to, when you're trying to get to a very subjective concept like the right fit out of 4,500 colleges, you have to be able to input a lot of criteria that are important to you, and that Define Your Priorities worksheet kind of does that. But you also need to include information that you are looking to have from a college or university that you might not know exists. And that's kind of hard to figure out. So one of the things that we usually talk about is, well, checking with current students and finding out if it really has all the things that the institutional website or brochures say they have. Getting to the true nature of campus life and what that looks like. Is it a safe campus? Is it an active campus? Is it more of a commuter school? Are there things to do? The things that international students kind of take for granted when they're looking at U.S. colleges, unless, again, they've had friends or family that have gone there recently. They don't know that the university campus is integral to every part of a student's life, not just for their academics and grades, but for their social and athletic needs and psychological needs, cultural needs, social needs. All of that can be enhanced through what a university or college provides to its students on campus. So students need to understand and be able to articulate, yeah, this is the kind of environment I'm looking for, and when they're building an AI agent to do some of that research. So the article out of Australia really touches on some of those key elements that students can use through ChatGPT by setting up an agent to help them do their research on schools, and those schools that show up will be the ones that most closely match based on publicly available information on the web. And that requires us to do the SEO, to be able to know how our name is being talked about, then know our content on our site, that it's up to date and accurate reflections of that student experience, whether it's having information on what number of students that you have. All of that is really a priority for what students who are looking to go to your institution will want to find out. So are you able to do that effectively? So this is are you aware of how students are using these tools, these generative AI tools, to research schools, and making sure that this might be the prompt that your agent partners can be trained on, is here are the things we want you to, if you're going to use AI to help your students narrow down their list of schools they might want to apply to or consider, here are some things you can do using AI to get at that information. And that's really a vital part of the process that we want you to be able to convince students, to your future students, that, hey, don't take my word for it. Go search for us, find the school that's right for you. We always talk about that, finding the school that's going to be the best fit. And that's the way you really go about helping to refine and use AI for good, for helping students to navigate that research process. So that's something that you need to be aware of as college and university reps, and those that are agents or partners or EdUSA advisors. How can you use AI to create agents for students to help them get a very cumbersome process more streamlined based on input that the student provides, whether it be through the Define Your Priorities worksheet or other tools or questions that you have prepared that you can have students fill out and then use that content to generate an AI agent that makes sense for them. So that's on the front end of the process, researching the schools that might be good fits. Then when it comes to those institutions that actually have an essay or a statement of purpose requirement for applicants, then how you shouldn't use generative AI tools is to help in the writing of those, or to actually do the writing, like create a first draft of my answer to this question, whether it's a prompt that the university gives or one that you create on your own, and then you add in factors that shows how committed a student I am based on my wide variety of activities, and well, here's what I'm looking for, and the kind of school that I want to attend, and all the criteria that a student might want to put in to create, to ask a generative AI tool to create an essay. No more than 200 words or whatever the limit is. So that's one way to do it. The other is to write something that answers the prompt the university has given, and then ask AI agents to refine or make grammatically correct, to change the tone or the voice, to add some different levels of enthusiasm or seriousness to different parts of the essay that you're being asked to write. So that process is something that can and should be done by students, where it's not AI creating the work, but refining the work that is completed by the student as a first draft. So I'm sure there will be other ways that AI will be used, whether it's to find scholarships from different institutions, to find housing in the area if they're looking beyond just on-campus options. If they have an other option to live off campus, particularly for grad students, they're typically going to want to live off campus. So all of these are ways that AI can and will be used, if it isn't already, in the college admissions process, particularly by international students. So wanted to certainly cover that today, because it is an evolving landscape. It's not just essays anymore. It's that first part of the process, looking at the research phase. So always good to keep on top of these things as how these tools are being leveraged. Obviously, for those of us who are campus-based admissions people, international recruitment people, we know there hardly a day goes by where we don't get emails from some sort of vendor or partner, a prospective partner that has a new AI tool that's going to be the next best thing to help streamline processes. So one thing I know, we could easily do another one of these versions on how this question is obviously focused on how students are using AI tools in the college admissions process. We could easily do another one of these next week on how universities and colleges are using AI in the college admissions process. So it's an ever-present and increasingly necessary tool that we need to get our own heads around to understand how it can be used by us to improve improve efficiencies, I should say, and how we conduct our business as recruiters, as communicators with students, and all the other points in their journey towards hopefully attending our institutions. So, but today, from the student perspective, that research phase and the essay writing phase seem to be the two most commonly used areas of the college admissions process where you are seeing students using AI tools. And Raphael, thank you for being on. Just saw your like popping through. Always good to see you. Hope you're doing well, and catch up with you on the road sometime soon. Now let's move on to our next question of the day, and that is, are the new arrival numbers in the United States what we think? And the last couple of weeks, we've seen article after article kind of with a lot of head scratching going on in the international ed community on how The SEVIS by the numbers report shows overall international student numbers, not new, overall international student numbers in the U.S. year on year from September 24 to September 25 were up 0.8%, which for most colleges and universities in the U.S., we experienced anywhere from 10 to 30% or more drops in new international student arrivals, and that typically how high a percentage you were down typically will depend on how reliant you have been on India as a source for your student markets. I've been sharing over the last month or so information I've received from our agents in the field in India, from my meetings with the public diplomacy team in Delhi, what that meant, and what my experience last week in Riyadh, talking to other colleagues, where they were down 20, 30%, and with Indian intake, some of them were down 60, 70% in terms of new Indian students starting. They might have picked up in other countries, but down certainly in India. I don't know if there was a college, unless they had zero, might have gotten 2 or 3, and it could have a big increase percentage-wise, but most every U.S. college saw drops in their Indian student arrivals. I would say 99.9% did see a drop in Indians coming to their campus this fall as new. And when those numbers are 20, 30, 40% or more for new arrivals, you would expect there to be an overall net negative impact on the overall number of international students. The SEVIS by the numbers reports seem to say that it wasn't as significant a drop, if any. It doesn't give us the new arrival numbers, just the totals. We'll see next month when we get to Open Doors data that where they do their fall snapshot survey of 400 or 500 colleges maybe that provide how their new numbers were this fall. You're going to see some more of that. Probably the closest we're going to get in terms of overall average down. I don't for a minute believe that overall the majority of colleges were up this fall. It's just a matter of how dependent those individual colleges are on India as a source market for their students. So what I will say about the arrival numbers, I'll share a few links in the chat. First one up is from Inside Higher Ed, and that has a lot to do with the international student arrival numbers. And this is the only things we've seen so far that's actually a government source that is from the National Travel and Tourism Office. And I'm going to hold my hand up here and say I didn't know what that office was, that it even existed. Been in the business long enough to have heard that before, but I've never heard of that office before. I think it's within the Department of Commerce. But that office reported numbers of that represent a 19% drop in new international student arrivals in this fall. So what that certainly reflects is, not a surprise. Maybe a surprise that number is low, but that only, I think it's through August. It does include September arrivals, since there are some schools that don't start until sometime in September, so we might not have that. Those arrivals wouldn't have been reflected in that Inside Higher Ed article from that office. So the other articles I'm sharing with you, anecdotal stories from the University of Madison, Wisconsin-Madison, where they were down 30% in international first-year student starts. So I think that that's for a large Big Ten institution to be down 30% in those numbers. You certainly. I think you will see that going to be a much more common number. That certainly would be more in line with what NAFSA was predicting, a 30% decline in new international students. Again, that for Madison, that's just at the undergraduate level. We don't know what the numbers are, or at least that's not part of this report from the UW Wisconsin Public Radio news site. So we see that challenge as to what it might be at the graduate level. I'm trying to look at their numbers for master's students. there was a drop there as well from 1487 to 1164. So that's probably in the maybe 15% down in master's degree candidates. For doctoral candidates, they're their largest group. They're basically flat. But certainly from the undergraduate and the master's level, you certainly see drops there, significant drops in new students or international student enrollments. And I'm sorry, those numbers I gave you for masters were not new starts, those were overall enrollments. So there's a 300 difference or so in the master's degree students in terms of a drop. So those numbers from Madison are certainly not the only ones where you see these large flagship schools having significant drops. We talk a lot about India and China on the Midweek Roundup, and certainly in the newsletter. And we know India took another huge beating, probably down over almost half of new Indian students in the United States this year versus last year in terms of drops of new students. So we're seeing consistently some real issues in India. I shared my experience last month when I met with the public diplomacy team and how international students are not a priority for visa appointments anymore there, they're recommending they're not going to be able to add new visa appointments in the lead up to the spring enrollment period. They're not going to be having visa days or extra appointments added in the summer months, like has been the case for over a decade. Those are significant pullbacks, and that's just India. That's not necessarily a universal thing. What I'm certainly surmising, and this is my unofficial take on what's happening, is where there have been recent trade deals signed, you see an uptick in activity. For example, a public diplomacy section at the embassy in Delhi said they're not doing any educational outreach, public events in India. Education USA can do their own thing, but in terms of the advising centers, but as an embassy and consulates and their staff, they're not doing public-facing events promoting the U.S. as a destination anymore. That's a significant shift in the world's largest sending market. Are we seeing potentially a change happening if India and the U.S. edge closer to a trade deal? I would guess yes. I would say there would be by that point, there'd be a new ambassador in place. There would be, once the shutdown's over and the Senate can vote on the confirmations for those individuals, that they have that done. You have somebody in place and on the ground. If you have a new trade deal signed with India or the war with Russia and Ukraine gets to a peace stage and normalization of relations happens with Russia, then maybe that will be less of an issue in terms of Trump saying, no, don't buy Putin's oil, Prime Minister Modi. If a trade deal happens, then I would expect things to turn around quite dramatically for Indian students. We did see, and if you heard a big sigh of relief yesterday and Monday across the country, around the world, that was coming from India, and where the USCIS clarified the new H-1B rules that were originally going to require every new applicant for H-1B starting for the next cycle and on April 1st, they will have to pay, or the companies that are sponsoring them for their H-1Bs will have to pay $100,000. Whether that's a university position, which have typically been exempt from caps previously, they would have had to pay that $100,000 fee, which meant most universities would never be able to pay that for an international faculty member or researcher. You now have the clarification that if someone is already in the United States on an established visa, whether that's student or exchange visa or whatever it might be, and is changing to an H visa, they will not be subject to that $100,000 fee. So that is probably a huge sigh of relief for universities who are looking to hire. Certainly for students, that means that the companies will likely give preference to talent that is already in the United States, and that means students on OPT and STEM OPT. So that's a huge benefit and sigh of relief, and certainly tips the scale in favor of those international students as opposed to companies buying talent will now have to pay for talent to come from abroad, upwards of over $100,000 to get them into the H-1B system. So we'll see what happens with that as further refinements come out in that H-1B process, and we know that will impact Indian student interest dramatically. So we'll see where things go from here. So those new arrival numbers are certainly not complete. We don't, and it would be great if DHS did provide us that information based on CBP numbers as they track new individuals coming into the country when they issue their digital I-94 forms, all of that. But that hasn't happened yet. This is from the National Trade Office, which up until a couple weeks ago I didn't know existed. So we'll see what happens. So last question of the day, and that is, how will Australia change its international education strategy? And I think you're seeing something developing here with Australia, where there were caps that were institutional caps, where the Australian government basically limits the number of international students that each institution can enroll. And obviously we're talking about a much different system in Australia, where you have less than 40 universities and 200 or so vocational programs. So there were allotments that each college or university had last year for new arrivals. Then individual institutions could petition the government for increases, and there was a modest increase of, I think, 9,000 or so allowed nationwide for 2025 or the upcoming cycle for 2026 entry, because they start their academic year in January, February in Australia. So there are some institutions that got increases, and one in particular, University of Sydney, which we profiled a week or two ago in the newsletter, that did not get any increase in the number of international students. Why, you may ask? Are they picking on University of Sydney? Don't fear for them. Don't cry for them, University of Sydney, because they have currently over half of their student population are now international at one of the group of 8 top schools in Australia. So the government's not going to let them get any bigger. I'm surprised, frankly, they didn't cut them and say you get a reduced allotment. Instead of 10,000 new international students, you can only have 9, because having over half your students be from at one of the top 8 schools in the country, be international. Maybe that's too much. Certainly Trump would blow a gasket if he knew that, based on his compact he wants to sign with U.S. colleges, limiting to 15% of undergraduates being international, and no more than one country being 5% or more. So a lot of challenges in this. Australia has some very interesting paths they can take. We've seen some be arguing for a human-centered approach to international education and immigration, where and then also using international education as a workforce strategy. And this probably is the one that most closely aligns with what folks in other countries in Asia are doing, particularly in Korea, Taiwan, Japan, are aligning economic priorities in terms of what kind of needs the marketplace has, the workforce has for jobs, skills that they're seeing as in deficit now, and encouraging more students to come to their country to study those fields, and then have smoother pathways, cleaner pathways to employment when they're done with their degrees. So that's what I think the government's approach will probably be, the latter, instead of a human-centered approach to international education, where it's all about the services provided, making sure they're doing a good job. Australia is one that does tend to have a better connection between international ed and economic development, workforce strategy as priorities. So we'll see if they do make that jump or not. And whereas now it's certainly defined specifically by their the allotment that they have from the government. And they have limited certain categories in terms of growth. So we'll see if anything further develops on that front. So that's what we have for you this week on the Midweek Roundup. Thanks for being a part of the conversation today. Looking forward to chatting with you in the days and weeks to come. Next week, we'll be doing another live from the home office here. But the week after that, we're going to be on location in Boracay, Philippines for a live event, Midweek Roundup, and when I'm there for the GSM Global Agent event. So thanks again for being a part of the conversation, and we look forward to chatting with you in the days and weeks to come. Cheers.